Hello, I am Robert Finnegan, host of the Talking Textiles Workforce series with AFFOA in collaboration with ATA. Learn more about ATA's supporting organization, AFFOA.org, at AFFOA.org. And now, let's talk textiles. Welcome, everyone, to Talking Textiles. I am Robert Finnegan, a member of ATA, and I am also the head of Educational Workforce Development for Advanced Functional Fabrics of America, or AFFOA. This episode is part of our Talking Textiles Workforce special series with AFFOA. The goal of this series is to explore the future of the textiles workforce. We'll be talking to professionals on hot topics in the industry, helping to inspire you in your role in the textiles industry. Today, we're talking about our future workforce. We'll be looking at leveraging CTE, or Career and Technical Education, and Career Pathways high school programs that have become popular in the U.S. education with the intent really to drive talent pipelines. I'll be joined by Judi Vigna, CEO of Specialized Career Guidance, and Patti Rego, Executive Director at Viva Fall River, headquartered in Fall River, Massachusetts. Welcome to the podcast. So, when I began my work at AFFOA, I was asked by my sponsors to really get out and to talk to as many industry leaders as I could, understand the needs, the disconnects in this very complicated industry, try to think about AFFOA's educational workforce development program as a roadmap that could support some of the needs that came out of this. One of the things that I noticed, and I've discussed this a number of times, but even in a textiles rich city like Fall River, Massachusetts, where we're going to feature today, there was this disconnect between what students were interested in and what available career pathways were around them. So some of the students, even studying engineering and fashion design, had so little connection to the industry members that were right around their corners. And this became a real hot topic of mine. In fact, career and technical education and career pathways programs at the high school level have become a real priority for us here across AFFOA. We're really hoping that we can solve some of this disconnect. So I actually called some of our friends over at Merrill Manufacturing, which is located right in Fall River, and they were very excited to put me in touch with a few folks that were really interested in this as well. One of those participants was Patti Rego. She is with an organization called Viva Fall River, and Viva Fall River really focuses on the industry and the cultural components of the city of Fall River. And then this led me to an introduction to Judi Vigna, the founder and CEO of Specialized Career Guidance. And I am so thankful every day for this recommendation. We've been really incredibly proud to partner with them on amazing work that's happening in Fall River we'd like to talk about today. So, Patti and Judi, welcome. And please, let's start with some introductions. I'd love to hear from both of you a little bit about your organization, your passions, and maybe how you became interested in this topic of fueling career pathways generally and fueling career pathways for the textiles industry in Fall River. So why don't we start with Patti?
Thank you so much, Robert, for having me on this podcast. It's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Patti Rego. I'm the executive director of Viva Fall River. We're basically an organization dedicated to celebrating, supporting, and promoting the history of Fall River through cultural, economic, and community development. So Fall River is historically known as a proud mill town with a deep manufacturing legacy. And in many ways, something I shout from the rooftops, it still is, but those old mills have now been like repurposed and reimagined as artist spaces and maker spaces. But in some cases, they actually still house remarkable manufacturers who may not be, printing and producing cotton cloth like they were in the 1800s and early 1900s, but are certainly doing some incredible luxury items like leather goods, handmade rugs, fine linens, menswear, knits. And in some cases, things that aren't even really connected to the textiles or soft goods industry, like medical instruments, precision threads, and machinery parts, like the very building blocks of that keep modern manufacturing running. So it's still a really relevant part of our economy, but it hasn't been treated as such ever since like the 80s and the 90s when a lot of the production went overseas. And I've always thought that that was a real shame because people don't know what's being made right here within, maybe a quarter of a mile from where they live. And I really feel like we should be celebrating these companies that weathered a lot of storms to not only stay in business, but to continue doing business in Fall River. So yeah, so these businesses I feel need to be celebrated and supported, and our community needs to understand what opportunities they offer, not necessarily for shopping, but for employment. And the topic in general is deeply personal for me. Manufacturing is a big part of my own family's story. My uncle ran a machine parts company up until just last year, and he's sold it to a wonderful manufacturer who is like definitely just making it so exciting to be watching a manufacturing kind of in this sense that we're talking about take hold again. My mother spent her life working mills. My dad was a custodian at a mill. I even worked in a mill for a short time one summer digitizing patterns. So it's really important to me. And I want the story to continue for my daughter and she's only 8.5, but I see a lot of the youth in this city not realizing the potential that they can have right here in Fall River. They feel like they have to go somewhere else in order to succeed. And I just want that story to continue in some way. They shouldn't have to feel that way. And that's why I was so passionate about the Durfee Workforce Development Program, because it's nurturing talent, it's helping businesses, it's showing students the diverse opportunities that exist right here, pattern making, R&D. There's so much more to this industry. And I think a lot of people have misconceptions. So my role is always at Viva Fall River is to always break through those misconceptions, change perceptions, and to connect people and to tell our stories and help build bridges. And so in this case, the bridge was between education and manufacturers.
Amazing. I love that. And one of the things that I've loved about digging into this industry is the family connections. It's not just rooted in the United States, but so many of these companies are rooted in family legacies. So I've loved that, and that's really interesting part of your story. So Judi, tell us a little bit about yourself and about your organization.
Well, Robert, I'm so excited and honored to be here. I just loved hearing Patty's intro. And yes, my name is Judi Vigna, and I'm CEO of Specialized Career Guidance. And I am equally passionate about fueling pathways for young adults. Our mission is to empower students, to create workforce pipelines, and to ignite economic growth. And meeting Patti, we certainly could do that here at Fall River. At the heart of that mission is the simple belief our high schools are full of young people who are motivated, curious, and ready to contribute. What's missing isn't talent, it's connection. They don't know what they don't know, so they can't want something that they don't know exists. I founded this organization in 2018 after seeing the clear disconnect between employers who needed skilled, reliable entry-level talent and the abundance untapped potential sitting in our classrooms. I saw it in my own son, and I know he was motivated and eager to work and make a contribution, and that just wasn't available to be able to have career exposure. So my background includes over 20 years working at the grassroots and community level, developing sustainable collaborations that make real impact. What makes our work different is that we don't build programs for people. We teach communities through our proprietary SCG Workforce Pipeline Accelerator for educators, the framework and the process to co-design this work. It has to be at the community level. It has to be through collaboration. And I feel so passionate about that. That means this framework brings people together to solve the problems collectively and create solutions that reflect the realities in their local context. When you have passion that's driving Patti to bring this advanced textile manufacturing and fashion design to life, that is exciting, and it tells a very real story at the level you need to make that change. So every community I've worked with faces the same two challenges. They need workforce, and they need to better engage their young people. And these challenges are actually opportunities. When we listen to the students, when we listen to them, and we engage them in the process, then they feel part of the solution. And we see not only stronger outcomes, but intrinsic motivation. And that is really when the real change happens. We're no longer pulling them. They are self-motivated to want more for themselves. They're driving the process. They have pride and they have long-term commitment take root. And that's what fuels my interest in this work, helping local ecosystems unlock what's already there. So thank you for inviting me to the conversation. Thrilled to be here.
Absolutely. No, there were a lot of two snap moments in that discussion. I couldn't agree more. Our industry needs assessment really focused on a couple of problems that really drove us toward knowing that we need to double down on our CTE high school space and really just a lot of the different kinds of nuanced career pathways programs that are coming out in the high school space. One, 100% of our industry partners said that they were concerned about their aging workforce. They're losing so much institutional knowledge. Two, they don't necessarily need college degrees for that entry level role. And so then my first question was great. In your community, what are the CTE students learning? And sure, there's some connection in
Mhm.
some communities, but oftentimes what you're seeing is that there isn't really a complete through line between students studying fashion design and technology or advanced manufacturing in communities whose lifeblood still is the advanced manufacturing of textiles. And so that became a really big mission of ours. Before we get into sort of concept to plan, I'm kind of curious if one of you could tell me a little bit about this incredible program that was built around BMC Durfee, the high school in Fall River, and how you thought about it and what really is the model for that program.
Judi, it's definitely, Judi is definitely the architect of that model. So I'm going to let the architect speak.
Judi, let's hear.
So it's interesting. When we started the conversation, the stakeholders thought they wanted to create a fashion design career pathway. When you're starting to design, you're also thinking about funding, right? Because funding is going to fuel what you're able to do when you're creating a pilot program and something new. And I love pilot programs because it sets the stage that we're all learning together. There
Yep.
isn't, right? We're all learning. Here's the framework, and we're going to co-design and learn together. When we looked at funding, we also know that there's a need for advanced textile manufacturing. So we married the two, right? We created something that could support what Durfee already had. Because remember, we build from where we are. So they had a fashion design early college program with UMass Dartmouth, and they had CTE programs in engineering, marketing, visual design, and a few others that could align because they didn't have a specific manufacturing. So we used what we had and we created a platform to now let's take a look at what we have and what employer partners exist here. And when we did that, we then did a little bit more research and asked what the employers needed. So was it they needed stitchers? They needed production? Yes, some did. But in addition, they needed marketing, they needed logistics, they needed warehousing, they needed system thinking. So now we could create from where they started. And you cannot excite a student or a staff member if they don't go. You need to bring them. And you also need to bring the employers
Mhm.
to the school because there's a disconnect, right? So the employers need to know, wow, this is what modern education looks like in fashion design and CTE, and what equipment and technology is there. So you have that aha moment. And then you have the aha moments when you bring these young people into these mills and they're seeing and feeling the passion of the staff that are making the goods.
Yeah.
And I just have to just give this one little moment that really I still get chills about. We're doing the career exploration, and we are intentional in design to be thinking about transportation as a barrier, right? So here's this beautiful city of Fall River that I fell in love with, and we are strategically thinking about the employer partners that are in different parts of the city, because in one city you could have an hour on a bus to get to work. We don't want that because we want to minimize the opportunity for them not to be dependable and reliable. So we walk into this one building, one manufacturer, and we're walking up the stairs, and the student says, "Oh, this is in my neighborhood. I had no idea." And then we open the door to where all the stitchers are, and she goes, "Oh, I've always wanted to learn to sew. I had no idea I could learn to sew so close to where I live." And you should have seen the reaction on the owner, all of us around. It was electric.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of moment that we're building into the career exploration.
Yep.
And then
Mhm.
taking it from there to build out work-based learning, industry recognized credentials that are going to support their success, and also providing a real alignment for long-term partnerships with our employer partners. So they're thinking long-term and have an opportunity for full-time employment before they graduate from high school. Because we know our young people still need support. And I want to focus, the work-based learning is helping our employer partners know that our young people are learning and eager to learn how to work, but they are not entry-level placements.
No.
This is a critical differentiator, right? And so that they can be hired as entry-level talent before they graduate from high school, while still gaining all that support that is needed for onboarding, filling out applications, resume development from our partners and from the school district.
Yeah. I loved so much of what you said, Judi, and I'm just going to double click on a couple of things because I think they're really important. Programs that are often offered in high school, even when we're talking about high schools that have CTE programs, are often seen as those inspire young minds to do, which this is. But the intentionality around focusing on senior year to me is where the differentiator is, because what we're trying to show is that if we have a school or school programs that are designated as CTE or designated as career pathways, then we need to get really intentional in senior year about how we're helping to build that pipeline. And it's not just for the students most importantly, but for the industry, because industry is local and industry is regional, which is why Fall River is such an important area of Massachusetts for us. And so I love that, and something that we really feel strongly about, and something that AFFOA is hoping we can help replicate in many other parts that are thinking about this, because I do think this is the sort of differentiated way to tackle this problem.
And I would like to focus on that senior year. It's really important to communicate to the school partners that with enough time, that they actually select the students junior year, at the end of junior year, who are most ready and have identified as going directly to the workforce. Because we need our employer partners to know, see, and feel the intrinsic motivation and the readiness of our students for success. And
Couldn't agree more.
so it's really important. And school districts, they have the pulse. That's why we need to do it before they graduate from high school.
Absolutely.
Because they're the secret sauce. They're the secret sauce. They know these students, they care deeply, and they want to work with the employer partners, and they make a huge difference.
Excellent. Love it. Patti, I'd love to hear a little bit from you. I know that the passion of this program and the concept of this program really came out of the work that you've been wanting to see happen in Fall River for some time. So tell me a little bit about some of the hurdles you faced, the time it took, and who you needed to kind of start to get really excited about this before this talent accelerator, this career accelerator kind of model could start to take place in Fall River.
Yeah, I think with any organization that is a nonprofit or not for profit, we face two major issues always. And the first one is, I think you can guess without having three guesses, is funding. And the second one is people. And it's not really, that's such a throwaway term, people, but it's about the right people. And people who, not everybody's going to share your level of passion for things, but they have to understand that programs like this don't just fall into place. There aren't like 30 people working on it and we all have one little piece. It's like constantly telling your story. In this case, this work I do is my story. So when I'm always talking about it, and that's how I found Judi. One day I was at an event, and why I chose to talk about this piece, because I work on a lot of things. I do tourism, but I just happened to do it. So some of it is kind of like a kismet thing, and there's also about living your story. You have to be fully understanding. So, but the funding piece, luckily, Viva Fall River as an organization, was born out of Fall River's Transformative Development Initiative, which is our district in Fall River. It is a program that is run by Mass Development. And so I was, so that's the seed funding or the funding, which of course was my funding. But beyond that, I mean, having the funding, I have my own job. So I needed to find that person. Like I can bring the ship to the harbor, but I needed to find somebody to steer the ship. And so finding Judi was kind of like that four-leaf clover that you find and you're like, yes. And I'm just so grateful that she's equally, it's very rare to find somebody who's equally passionate. And she's just got this deep knowledge of the intricacies that she was just discussing in her previous answer, but just the, having like what are the chances of finding somebody who just did a pilot in another nearby area that's very similar, but also knowing, that she was open to how this would be different. Because that's always when I work with different consultants, or I work with people who have done things in other places. I know we all think that our area is unique. My area is unique though, and I think one of the other big hurdles beyond that is just making the connections. I've always had a good relationship with the school department. I've worked with them on other projects. So that part was not as difficult to me, although I am so grateful that they are equally just so committed to education and to preparing these kids for the real world, because it's as real as it gets in gateway cities like Fall River. There's a lot of kids who aren't thinking about what Ivy League school they're going to go to. So we all have to be really like, real talk, like level set. But I think just be able to like talk to manufacturers who a lot of them were like, we've seen a lot of people, we've heard people say they're going to do this. We work with people, we work with agencies. We had a bad experience. I mean, there was a big wall put up, and it took a lot longer than I thought it was going to. And I think that was, for a while we had the funding, but we didn't have the partners. And then there was a time we had the partners and we didn't have the funding. So it just seemed like we were on this seesaw, and until it all leveled out. And then when it did, then it was like go time. And then that's when it really came into being affiliated with a group of people who didn't understand the word impossible.
Yeah.
Like there was a point where we were like, this is going to take, like, we're all going to have to really be into this. And not one person was like, no, it's too hard or it can't be done. And again, that's when all the stars align. And that's why I am so set on helping to see this continue, because this wasn't just like somebody gave us a big check and we were like, all right, let's do it. It took a lot of work. And so we know it's more than about any one thing. It's so much bigger than that.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yes, it is. There's a lot of moving pieces, and a lot of it is about that optimism. It fuels the energy, but you've got to get stuff done. And I've loved to see that with this program. Okay, so hats off to both of you.
Thanks.
Each of these ideas like sort of has a simple truth, but there are always those million complications. So I'd love to hear a little bit about the complexity of managing the very many different stakeholders involved. How did partners like AFFOA help? How did partners like Mass Development help? And how did you manage all the complexities of the partnerships involved to make this happen?
I managed it with Judi.
Yeah.
Judi's so that was my piece. So Judi, I want you to tell, because she was really just instrumental.
Well, Patti, I feel the same about you, and it really is a team approach. And so with complexities and multiple stakeholders, I would say I led the work with grace and humility and appreciation for the complexity. And I was very transparent. I think when you're working with multiple stakeholders, it's important to help level set what others are managing, right? So you may not have awareness as an employer of how complex it is within a school district. And a school district might not understand the complexities employers are working with really lean staffs and tight budget. So this is really helping to acknowledge those realities right out loud, saying them with as much compassion as you can. There's no blaming. It's reality setting. It's sharing the real hurdles and then co-designing in real time a new solution. And so I'm a big collaborator. Patti's a big collaborator. Every stakeholder we had was. And sometimes you're frustrated. You're like, how come we can't move this big boulder? And we just have to pause, step back and say we can. We just have to look at the boulder differently. Mm-hmm. And we were doing that with limited time because Students are graduating. We run out of time. Students graduate. That clock is ticking, 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 ticking. So that means you have to pivot in real time. And so a pilot program where we wanted an industry recognized credential had to be left off the table this year, and they can build it in next year when they have a bit more time to a longer stretch. And our partners were fantastic. We needed multiple funders, right? So we had Mass Development give seed money, and then the Creative Catalyst grant. We had AFFOA come and provide additional funds that let us do more data research that will help the CTE toolbox. And we had Mass Hire provided employability skill development, as well as the funding for the stipends for the students, which was really helpful when employers are lean and they may have 1 to 3 students that they're taking for work-based learning at the same time. So funding is really important. Can't say enough about the commitment from the school, from Durfee High School, from their leadership, from their guidance teams. Really impactful. They cared so deeply about each and every one of those students. I mean, we started with 40 students in career exploration, 26 of which applied for the 10 work-based learning, and we needed the most ready students. And then they supported them all through that entire process, and it even expanded to other students who were not initially selected in the first work-based learning program, but with interest from additional employer partners and the connection through career exploration, additional positions were created. And our employer partners, I cannot tell you how many phone calls, how many visits, can we pivot just a little? Can we change the date just a little? The answer was always yes, Judy. How can we do this? How can we make this better? And we did it.
I love that. And that answers so many of the questions about the successes, of which there were many. Some of those challenges about pivoting and needing to be sort of personalized with industry. So I think that covered a lot of ground. I am going to jump to looking ahead a little. You know that one of the reasons I was so excited about this work and to jump in and collaborate and partner is that we see strengthening our CTE high school and career pathways and the pathways into community colleges as a real primary opportunity area, not just here in Fall River, but across the country. Partners like Viva Fall River and Specialized Career Guidance are incredibly important to us to continue to foster those relationships and to build programs here and abroad. And when I say abroad, abroad in different states. So I'd love to share some quick perspectives and what your hopes are for this industry and what some of the needs that need to occur for this to become an increasing reality with more viability, specifically pathways from high school into careers. Just share some perspectives. And we'll start with Patti.
I mean, I think overall, I think people need to, and by people, I mean like anybody who thinks about workforce development. Because I was working with somebody else on another concept, and what Judy said earlier about there is no one size fits all solution to this, and whatever workforce or a career, whatever it is that you're designing has to be specific to the players. And I think a lot of people try to standardize it. And of course, to some extent, payment, student stipends, but we can be standardized. But it really, you need to look at it as these are kids we're talking about. And these are also businesses and people with lives and who have had brands that they've worked really hard to build. And these aren't Nikes. And there are real people involved here, and it means a lot to them. So I think my hope is that people start to realize that this is not one case where you can standardize it. But there are best practices. And I think that's something that I would hope that through this process, hoping that we're able to continue this and year after year, that we'll be able to not only develop those for ourselves, but be able to share those with other people. I think so much of that, the best practices, we can do our best, but there also comes a larger support, not only municipal support, but support from the Commonwealth, helping to break down the barriers of like how I mentioned about how do you pay students and how do we tap into funding. And a lot of what we're doing here, granted, funding for education, but because we're building something new, you can look at it as 2 funding sources or you can look at it as no funding sources. So there's so much perception shifting on so many levels. And I just think, the more that we can get support on a larger level, and I mean, not only for Fall River's manufacturing ecosystem, but for south coast of Massachusetts. And I know that there is, and AFFOA is definitely a testament to that. In the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I think we do realize that there has not been enough support for manufacturers. And I would love to see, well, I would love to see it not be looked at in the rear view and to have manufacturing be looked at in front of us, not like looking back. Because I think it's such an amazing creative industry, and it touches science, it touches art, it touches engineering, and there's so many different facets to it that I think raising that awareness is going to help. And it may not just be in the human aspect, but it will help in the local economic aspect as well.
Yeah, love that. Amen to so much of that. Judi, and maybe Judi, you can even speak to, because I know that this is not the only industry sector that your work has done work in. So maybe you can talk about some of your looking ahead and what you'd like to see, and perhaps in the context of what you've seen that is either similar to or different in the other industry sectors that you've worked with.
So I think it is very important to have a framework on which to build. I think each is customizable to the local community, and that is critical. I think that first we have to do is connect the dots. I think a lot of this work is being done, and some of it is excellent work with deeply committed folks at the table doing this work, but it's very siloed. And so if we are not aligning the program so students can clearly see how these high school experiences lead to real local career opportunities, we're missing a major opportunity. And second, we need to broaden the definition of partnership. It's not school and employers. It's bringing in training providers and higher education, trade associations, workforce boards, and funders to support the ecosystem development. And third, we need to clearly communicate the return on investment for every stakeholder, because we want to make sure we're creating a win-win-win. And that win-win-win is for students, employers, and the community. And then when we get the momentum and you get those young people, it's contagious. It's contagious. And that's how you create, you make the change from isolated success to scalable. Right. And we really need infrastructure development. That is really what I think is most necessary. So when I think about across the different industries and why this works, the framework is because you have three building blocks. You have the career exploration, which builds the excitement and gives hope and that intrinsic motivation. Then you have the career pathways where they're getting course curriculum, they're getting work-based learning, they're getting an industry recognized credential. And then the missing sauce is they're getting that real investment from your employer partners that are looking at this in a co-design way for long-term workforce pipeline development, not one student at a time, one semester, maybe this semester, maybe no, long-term. Yep. So I think that's really important. And I think the model must be local. It must be local because transportation is a major barrier. Every single survey, every single stakeholder I've ever talked to. So to make that, manufacturing is one of the wonderful industries because they are a brick and mortar. They exist. You know where it is. There's ways around that. They're solution-based. One of the areas unique to the advanced textile manufacturing that I worked with in Fall River is there are a lot of small independent companies. So they have tight budgets, they have lean staff, they haven't really explored career progression. So the survey of our 40 students really showed that job stability and career growth were the two most important considerations for full-time employment. And these are 18-year-old students, senior year. So these are the students that society is saying does not want to work. And I would like to say, I think there's a different perspective to pause and reflect on.
Yeah.
And so, bringing that to all stakeholders tells a compelling story because they have a shared passion about solving this.
Yeah. No, I love that. And one of the words that you used early on in your answer was the word infrastructure. And one of the things that we've been really committed to do here at AFFOA is to help build some of that framework within the CTE programs of fashion design and technology, which isn't manufacturing, and advanced manufacturing, which isn't really thinking of soft goods manufacturing as part of their what they're leading up to. And so if we build a bridge, if we build a toolkit, if we can do a little bit more in the infrastructure side, then I think we'll see more of these programs grow. And we're excited to work with partners like yourselves to do that work and to continue to grow this and to continue to grow the work in Fall River, which is so close to our headquarters. So we've loved every minute of partnering with Viva Fall River and with Specialized Career Guidance. The work is absolutely excellent, and I believe we will be doing a continued portion of this same episode with some additional stakeholders, so stay tuned for that. But really, we cannot thank you enough for what you've done in this industry and the regional economic activity. And really, just a huge shout out to both Patti and to Judi. Thank you for joining us today. And of course, a huge shout out to ATA, our collaborators on this podcast series. I have loved having this conversation, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of ATA Talking Textiles. ATA is a not-for-profit association representing the international specialty fabrics marketplace. Learn more about the events, workshops, and webinars ATA hosts throughout the year at textiles.org/events.